What would your younger self say about how your family turned out?
I sat in my kitchen staring at the untouched lemon cake I'd ordered 2 days earlier, telling myself I didn't care if no one showed up. I lit the candles anyway, 6 little flames struggling to stay upright in the frosting, and while I'm not the kind of woman who throws herself a pity party, this year had started off with a quiet I couldn't shake. 51 years old, divorced, no kids, a decent career consulting remotely for corporate clients I've never met in person, and yet here I was, still convincing myself that this time, maybe just this once, they'd remember. I wasn't asking for much. Just a dinner. A call. A damn card would have been enough. But the phone stayed silent, the doorbell never rang, and the only thing that showed up was a deep, dull ache that started somewhere behind my ribs and stayed there, pulsing quietly like an old bruise. At exactly 5:30, I sat down with a glass of wine, thinking, okay, they're running late. I imagined them all in the car, maybe my mom calling ahead to tell me not to peek out the window because they had balloons or some ridiculous banner. I pictured Mark, my brother, carrying a bottle of wine he didn't pay for, making the same tired joke about how old I'm getting. My dad, silent but present, nodding like he hadn't forgotten my birthday the last 4 years in a row. I gave them that much credit. I shouldn't have. It was around 6 when the truth hit me. Not in a gentle way. More like a punch, low and ungraceful. I had been scrolling through Facebook, not even looking for anything, just letting my thumb wander across the screen like muscle memory. That's when I saw it. My cousin Jessica had posted a photo. A hotel room. Bright lights. A view of the Strip. My brother, front and center, holding a giant margarita glass like some frat boy stuck in a middle-aged body. My parents were in the background, smiling. All 3 of them. In Las Vegas. I stared at that photo for a good minute, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was old. Maybe it was one of those throwback pictures. But the caption killed that hope fast. Can't believe we pulled it off. Surprise Vegas trip for Mark. Happy early birthday, bro. Early birthday. For him. Mine was today. I felt my ears ring, the kind of ring that creeps in when your blood pressure spikes and you're holding in something dangerous. I read the caption again, thinking there had to be a mistake. They wouldn't do that. Not this year. Not after last year, when they called me the day after my birthday and said they'd just lost track of time. Not after I told them how much that stung. Not after all the thankless holidays I hosted, the favors I did, the emergencies I bailed them out of when Mark couldn't be bothered to show up. I texted my mom short, to the point, "Are you guys in Vegas?" Her reply came 7 minutes later. 7 whole minutes. Enough time to spin scenarios in my head, excuses she might throw at me, maybe some confession about how it was Mark's last-minute idea and they felt trapped into it. Instead, she wrote, "Oh honey, we thought your birthday was next week. So sorry. We'll make it up to you." Make it up to me? That line had been tossed at me more times than I could count. Like the year they skipped Christmas because Mark's daughter had the flu, except they forgot I had made dinner for 8. Or the time they said they'd help me after my surgery but sent flowers instead. Always the same tune. Always an excuse. Always Mark at the center of the universe and me orbiting somewhere out in the cold, expected to stay grateful for crumbs. I didn't reply to my mom. I didn't answer the call from my dad that came 30 minutes later. I didn't even bother listening to the voicemail Mark left where he called me sis, like it still meant something. I sat there in my kitchen, the lemon cake slowly collapsing under the weight of its own pointlessness, and I finally knew, it wasn't forgetfulness. It was choice. They remembered his birthday. They flew him to Vegas. They made time, spent money, booked flights, packed bags, and smiled in pictures. But for me? For the daughter who handled the estate when Grandma died, who handled Dad's paperwork when he was in the hospital, who paid Mark's electric bill once because his unemployment check was delayed. They forgot. Again. And here's the question that's probably on your mind, and I want you to sit with it. If your own family keeps forgetting you on the most basic human level, what are you supposed to do? Forgive them again? Swallow it and move on? Or do you finally draw a line? I sat there that night with my laptop open, wine half drunk, candles burned down to wax puddles, and I did something I never thought I'd do, not just for myself, but against them. I opened up a real estate site. Not Zillow. Not some casual browsing app. I went deep. High-end listings, no filters. I started scrolling through villas. Not because I needed a house, but because I needed proof, real, tangible proof, that I was no longer waiting for their damn permission to be seen. And somewhere around the third glass of wine, I found it. A house that didn't just whisper freedom. It shouted it. Pool, ocean view, nothing around but palm trees and quiet. It was more than I'd ever spent in my life. But for once, it felt like the right kind of reckless. They forgot me. Again. And I was done being the one who remembered them. The morning after my so-called birthday, I woke up not to messages or belated calls or even a passive-aggressive comment from my mother trying to defuse the silence, but instead to a painfully bright sun cutting across the kitchen tiles and a fridge still full of leftovers no one would eat. The lemon cake sat under its plastic dome like a gravestone to my own idiotic hope, and even as I tossed it into the trash with a muttered curse under my breath, I could feel something in me snap, not in an explosive, headline-making way, but in that quiet, definitive manner people never notice until the consequences come raining down. I wasn't angry the way I used to get, not that shallow, hot kind of mad where you rant to a friend and then forgive the next day. No, this was deeper, slower, more dangerous, the kind of fury that doesn't yell but plans. Their excuse had already arrived, nicely wrapped in faux regret and topped with a bow of performative cluelessness. We thought it was next week, my mother had texted, as if I were an event on a badly synced calendar, a dentist appointment she'd meant to reschedule. Mark, of course, sent a selfie from a blackjack table the next afternoon, grinning like an idiot with some caption about family fun and overdue bro time, followed by a line that made my eye twitch. Wish you were here. It was the kind of thing people say when they know damn well you're not there, not invited, not thought of at all, and worse, they're fine with it. It's always been this way, I realized, not in some sudden revelation, but with the bitter familiarity of a truth I'd buried too many times. Mark, the golden boy, the second chance magnet, the walking chaos parade everyone forgave no matter how many times he let them down, had a lifetime pass to their affection. My parents had always made excuses for him, even back in high school when he crashed Dad's car and somehow I ended up grounded for creating a stressful household. When he flunked out of community college, they called it a break year and sent him to Europe with grandma's inheritance. And when his second marriage imploded in a spectacular mess of debt and cheating, they housed him for 9 months, fed him, coddled him, and blamed the ex-wife for not understanding his emotional needs. Meanwhile, I was the one who co-signed loans, picked up his kids from school when he forgot, and stayed up nights helping Dad organize medical records during his cancer scare, and yet, somehow I was always the footnote in my own family story. But this wasn't about Mark, not really. This was about me finally seeing the shape of my life, the way I kept twisting myself into someone they could appreciate, someone easy to forget because I never demanded to be remembered. I had spent decades keeping the family peace, managing everyone's schedules, sending group texts no one answered, remembering anniversaries, birthdays, prescriptions, allergies, pet names, and dish preferences, all in the hope that they'd see me as the one who held things together. And they did, but not in the way I needed. I was useful, not loved. Reliable, not treasured. The family assistant. The emotional janitor. So, while they tossed dice in Vegas and drank overpriced cocktails with names like Desert Sunrise and Lady Luck, I sat down with my laptop and typed 3 words into a real estate site I hadn't visited since my divorce, Ocean View Villa. Not out of whimsy, not as a distraction, but because something in me had shifted and would not shift back. I wanted silence that didn't feel like punishment. I wanted space that wasn't carved out from leftovers. I wanted something mine, not bought with anyone's approval or rented for weekends, but fully, absolutely mine. Scrolling through pages of homes I couldn't afford felt almost obscene at first, like I was trespassing into someone else's dream, someone richer, freer, better connected. But then I remembered the years I'd been responsible, frugal, quietly generous, never flashy, never wasteful. I thought about the travel fund I'd built, but never used because someone always needed help. I thought about the bonus I got last fall and how I almost sent some to Mark for his new business idea until he ghosted for 3 weeks and posted photos from Miami. I thought about the woman I'd been, the way I'd let my own joy be an afterthought in the name of family. By the third hour, I had narrowed it down to 5 properties, all of them stunning in their own way, but one caught my breath and didn't let it go. It wasn't just the open-plan kitchen or the massive windows framing a panoramic view of the Pacific, it was the pool, a perfect curve of blue surrounded by palm trees and sky, with nothing but quiet stretching in every direction. It looked like the opposite of being forgotten. It looked like presence. I called the agent, my voice steadier than expected, and booked a virtual tour for the next day. No one knew. I didn't tell friends, didn't text the one coworker I half-trusted with personal news, didn't drop hints on social media. This wasn't a story I wanted comments on. This wasn't for applause. It was a surgical decision, cold, necessary, clean. That night, as they no doubt laughed over some overpriced buffet dinner and my phone remained silent except for a spam call and one promotional email from a bookstore I hadn't visited in 2 years, I took out a notepad and wrote a list. It wasn't a pros and cons thing. It was a title, all caps, what they get. I listed every time I had bailed someone out, helped someone move, stayed silent to keep the peace, swallowed my pride, showed up when no one else did. Then underneath, I wrote what I got. It was a shorter list. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It never was. It was a pattern, intentional, practiced, and polite enough to avoid confrontation. And the thing about patterns is that you can only break them by refusing to participate. I didn't want revenge, not in the way people think of it, with shouting and dramatic exits and storming out of family dinners. I wanted something better. I wanted to become so quietly out of reach, so completely unavailable, that they would feel the absence the way I had felt theirs. Not loud, not obvious, just gone. And that was exactly what I planned to give them. The thing about silence, real silence, not just the absence of sound, but the absence of expectation, is that it grows on you. It starts off cold and awkward, like an unexpected guest, something that sits in the room and makes your skin itch. But then, over time, it begins to settle, to spread out into the corners of your life, and before you know it, you find comfort in the way no one is asking for anything, in the way your phone doesn't light up with demands disguised as questions, in the way you can hear yourself think without 10 other voices trying to take up space in your head. That's what those 3 weeks felt like after the birthday that wasn't. Silent, yes, but also strangely pure. I didn't reply to any of them, not even when Mark texted me 2 days later with a dumb gif of a puppy holding a cake that said, "Happy belated," followed by a sentence that tried so hard to sound sincere it was almost insulting. "Hope you're not mad, sis. You know we love you." It was just one of those mix-ups. A mix-up. Like ordering the wrong pizza topping or forgetting to return a library book. That's what my absence had become to them, an administrative error. I didn't answer. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence keep doing its work. The villa closed faster than I expected, which, in retrospect, probably had something to do with the fact that I paid in full, without negotiation, and transferred funds that had been sitting untouched for years in a high-yield account I'd built quietly during a decade of saying no to myself while saying yes to everyone else. I didn't even blink. Not because I'm rich, not in the way people assume, but because I was done saving for some imaginary emergency that was never mine. I was done budgeting in case someone else needed rescuing again. The first time I stepped into that villa, the air smelled like ocean salt and fresh plaster, and something in my chest uncoiled for the first time in years. The floor was cool under my feet, the glass doors opened out onto a view that didn't just impress, it stopped you mid-thought. The pool sparkled without apology, and I knew, standing there with the keys in my hand, that this was not just a purchase. This was a boundary made real. A line in the sand. A gate with no code they could guess. It took me 2 days to unpack, not because I had brought much, I didn't, but because I wanted to mark every room with something intentional. No clutter. No compromise. Everything chosen, placed, and left exactly where I wanted it. I bought fresh flowers that weren't for guests. I made a breakfast that wasn't designed to impress anyone. I lay on the sofa in the middle of the day and let the sun hit my legs without wondering what needed doing next. And for the first time in what felt like decades, I did not feel like someone's afterthought. Then, on a Sunday morning, with a glass of champagne in my hand and the breeze slipping through the linen curtains, I opened the camera app on my phone, framed the shot carefully, just me, the pool, a sliver of blue sky, and took the photo. I didn't overthink the caption. I didn't try to be cryptic or poetic or clever. I just typed the words, "Not bad for a girl with the wrong birthday week." I posted it to Facebook, closed the app, and went back to my champagne. The reaction, when I checked a few hours later, was immediate and exquisite. Over 50 comments, almost all variations of surprise, confusion, admiration, and thinly veiled envy. Wait, where is this? You moved. OMG, this looks amazing. Is this a vacation or did you actually buy this? My cousin Jessica, the same one who posted the Vegas picture, commented with a line that could barely contain her curiosity. Did I miss something? This looks incredible. And then there it was, my mother's comment, perfectly timed, perfectly crafted to look harmless, but weighed down with all the guilt she wasn't ready to name. Wow, honey. This looks beautiful. Where are you? When did this happen? I didn't answer any of them. Not immediately. I waited until Mark texted me directly, a little more panicked this time. Hey, did you seriously buy this place? His message was followed by 3 dots, like he was still typing, but nothing else came through. Maybe he couldn't decide if he was impressed or offended. Maybe both. I replied after an hour with one sentence, "Yep." With the money I was saving for someone else's Vegas trip. There was no answer after that. And it was perfect. For once, I didn't need to explain myself, to justify a choice, to soften the edge so everyone could digest it without guilt. I let the weight of my choices speak for themselves. I let the image of me, alone, serene, poolside, be the mirror they had to look into. No captions about gratitude. No disclaimers about blessings. Just the raw fact of it. I had built a life they weren't invited into. I poured another glass of champagne and read the comments again, not for validation, but for proof. Proof that visibility could exist on my terms. Proof that the same people who had failed to show up could, at the very least, watch me walk away. And that was just the beginning. There's a moment, subtle but undeniable, when people start to realize they've lost access to you, not in the obvious ways, like changed numbers or blocked profiles, but in that deeper, more unsettling sense. The one that tells them you've mentally closed the door they used to walk through without knocking, and now they're standing outside, uncertain, suddenly aware that something is different, and worse, that they didn't notice it happening until it was already done. That moment came precisely 3 days after I posted the villa photo, and it arrived in the form of a delivery. A carefully arranged bouquet of lilies and hydrangeas, my mother's signature combination, which I hadn't seen since the day of my divorce when she dropped them off, said nothing about the lawyer fees I'd eaten, and left 10 minutes later to beat traffic. The card was exactly what I expected, thinking of you. Can't wait to see your new place. Love, Mom and Dad. Not a single acknowledgement of the missed birthday, not a whisper of an apology, just that same, hollow phrasing they'd perfected over the years, warm in tone, empty in substance, and clearly written not to make amends, but to assert presence, to remind me that they still considered themselves part of the narrative even though they hadn't earned the right to be there. I set the flowers in the corner, not because I was touched, but because I wanted the scent to linger as a reminder of how performative guilt tends to smell, clean, fragrant, and ultimately unconvincing. The next day, Mark called. I didn't answer. He called again, twice, then texted, "Okay, so can we just talk?" Not about Vegas, just talk. Which translated, in Mark speak, to, "I'm uncomfortable with not being the center of your attention, and I need to reset the dynamic without addressing what caused the shift." I let it sit. He followed up with another message that almost made me laugh. "Mom's kind of freaking out." You good? That phrase, "you good," was so Mark. Always skating around actual emotions, always pretending concern while really trying to manage optics. He didn't want to know how I felt. He wanted to know what I was planning, because the lack of access scared him more than the idea that I might be hurt. A few days later, I extended the olive branch, but not the kind they were used to. I sent out a group message to my immediate family, Mom, Dad, and Mark. I told them I'd be hosting a small weekend gathering at the villa. Nothing fancy. Just the immediate circle. A chance for them to see the place, reconnect, catch up. I could practically feel the confusion and discomfort radiating back through the silence that followed. They weren't sure if this was a trap or a test or maybe even a genuine attempt at reconciliation, and to be honest, I wanted it to feel like all three. I gave them the date, reminded them to RSVP, and signed off without any frills. The message was clear. I was in control of the guest list now. When the weekend arrived, they came, of course they did. Curiosity has always been the one force greater than their pride. My mother brought wine she'd clearly Googled to appear upscale. My father wore the uncomfortable linen shirt he saves for moments when he thinks appearances matter, and Mark showed up last, carrying a gift bag that was too large, too loud, and reeked of overcompensation. Inside was a Bluetooth speaker and a card that said, "For Poolside vibes." Sorry again. Vegas was dumb. That was the closest thing to an apology I was going to get, and it was drenched in Mark's usual charm disguised as effort. I greeted them at the door with a smile that said nothing and everything all at once. I walked them through the villa, casually mentioning the square footage, the imported tile, the custom pool installation that had taken 3 weeks, but was worth every minute. I saw the flicker in my mother's eyes, the calculation, the quiet envy. My father walked slowly, nodding at the finishes, occasionally murmuring things like, "This is really something." Mark, of course, tried to make jokes to break the tension. "Man, sis, you really went full eat, pray, love on us, huh?" I smiled, poured drinks, and kept the mood just light enough to keep them off balance. At dinner, I laid out rules, not explicitly, not like a schoolteacher, but through tone, pace, and presence. I steered the conversation when it veered toward dismissiveness. I paused deliberately when they interrupted me, forcing them to circle back and actually listen. I made eye contact long enough to remind them that this wasn't their table, and I wasn't a guest in my own life anymore. When Mark tried to dominate the conversation with a story about his latest business idea, I asked pointed questions that made it obvious he hadn't thought it through. He shifted in his seat. My mother tried to save him, but I let her flounder a bit before changing the subject. They weren't used to this version of me, centered, direct, unwilling to be guilted or minimized. It made them uncomfortable, and in that discomfort, I saw something unexpected. They began to behave. Not kindly, not lovingly, but carefully. And that was fine with me. Respect, even if born out of unease, was still better than the casual disregard I'd been fed for decades. The next morning, over coffee by the pool, I opened a manila envelope I'd left conspicuously on the patio table. My mother looked at it, then at me, curiosity flaring in her eyes. I handed each of them a letter, individually addressed, printed on clean white stock paper. Inside was a copy of my new estate plan. I didn't speak as they opened it. I let them read. There were no threats, no dramatic exclusions. Just facts. I had changed my beneficiaries. I'd left the villa to a foundation for single women over 40 rebuilding their lives after loss. The rest of my assets, carefully detailed, were set to be distributed quietly to causes that had meant something to me, causes I'd supported while they weren't paying attention. My mother blinked, her mouth slightly open. My father looked at me, eyes narrowed, not angry, but surprised in a way that bordered on respect. Mark, as expected, laughed awkwardly and said, "You're not dying or something, right?" I shook my head. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just making sure the things I've built go where they're actually seen." I didn't wait for their reactions. I stood, took my coffee, and walked to the edge of the pool, looking out at the sea, the light bouncing off the water like it had no interest in secrets or regret. I had given them a view. I had given them access for one night. But I had also made sure they knew that from now on, nothing was automatic, nothing was assumed, and nothing was owed. The sun was already sliding down behind the ridge by the time we sat for dinner, the sky painted in streaks of faded gold and bruised lavender, the kind of soft, cinematic dusk that made even the most uncomfortable silences feel like they belonged in a movie about redemption or reunion. But this wasn't that kind of story, and everyone at that table knew it. The table itself, long and low and positioned perfectly along the patio edge overlooking the pool, had been set with quiet precision. No centerpiece, no forced color scheme, just crisp white plates, stemmed glasses catching the last light, and the sound of distant waves folding into the cliffside below. I didn't play music. I didn't make a toast, not yet. I just watched them as they chewed, sipped, nodded, filling the space with small talk that failed to settle the air between us. My mother, ever the performer when she senses discomfort she can't fix, was talking about some documentary she'd watched about blue zones and longevity, as if casually tossing out theories about Mediterranean diets and centenarians could smooth over the months of deliberate silence and emotional laziness she'd masked as forgetfulness. My father, as usual, offered half-formed thoughts between bites, his way of participating without committing to anything that might make him responsible for the temperature in the room. Mark, across from me, had that same nervous charm he always defaulted to when he felt cornered, laughing too loudly at his own stories, cracking his knuckles, pretending to be fascinated by the design of my wine glasses while I caught him stealing glances toward my phone every time it lit up on the table. I waited. I let the awkwardness marinate just long enough for them to feel the weight of their presence not being assumed, and then, only when I sensed they had begun to understand that this was not just a dinner, but a reckoning, I lifted my glass and tapped it gently with a fork. The sound was clean, sharp, and it stopped the motion around the table like someone had hit pause on a remote. "To being remembered," I said, letting the words settle before I took a sip, my eyes never leaving my mother's. She smiled, tight, forced, polite, and murmured something like, "Of course," while Mark shifted in his seat and glanced at my father, who, to his credit, looked at me with something that resembled shame but never dared to cross the threshold into apology. "I just think," I began, setting my glass down slowly, "that when you spend decades keeping track of everyone else's milestones, celebrations, breakdowns, and recoveries, there comes a point where you begin to wonder whether any of it would be noticed if you just stopped." My voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that comes not from rage but from absolute clarity. And I did stop. For the first time in my life, I stopped organizing, reminding, fixing, filling in gaps that were never mine to fill, and the most remarkable thing happened: nothing. No one noticed. I could see my mother bristling, the way her fingers tightened slightly around her fork, the way her mouth opened half a second before her brain decided to go with another script entirely, but I didn't give her the space to interrupt. I leaned in just enough to make my words undeniable. "I watched you fly to Vegas for Mark's birthday like you were actors in a commercial for selective memory, and when I reached out, because I had to ask, not because you told me, you delivered that insult wrapped in a bow, we thought it was next week. You didn't forget. You reprioritized." Mark exhaled, loud enough for it to be performative. "Okay, look, I said I was sorry," he began, his voice straining with the effort of trying to sound both injured and reasonable. "It was a dumb mix-up, but you're kind of blowing this up, don't you think? I mean, you got this amazing place. Clearly you're doing fine." "That's the part you don't get," I interrupted, my voice cutting through his attempt like a clean blade. "This place isn't a consolation prize. It's a declaration. It's what it looks like when someone finally decides they don't need to explain why they're done. This villa? It isn't for show. It's for silence. It's for choosing something over someone. It's for me." The table went still, the kind of still that feels like something might tip over if anyone breathes wrong. My mother dabbed at the corner of her eye with a cloth napkin, not crying, not yet, but playing at the edges of emotion the way she always did when she realized she'd lost control of the script. "We never meant to hurt you," she said quietly. "It was never intentional." "But it was consistent," I replied, almost kindly. "And that's worse." They didn't finish their food. No one asked for seconds. When I brought out dessert, a store-bought pie with no candles and no explanation, they each took polite bites, as though trying to pretend we hadn't just said the things we'd never had the courage to say before. I let them linger for a while afterward, talking among themselves in broken, hesitant phrases, but I had nothing more to offer. The performance was over. As the evening waned and the coastal air grew sharper, I handed them each a plain white envelope, the same ones I'd prepared days earlier, the same weight, the same fold. Inside each was a photograph, me, standing by the pool, holding the villa keys with the Pacific behind me, smiling not for the camera but for the person I finally remembered to be. On the back, I had written in black ink, the kind that doesn't smudge and leaves no room for interpretation, "This is the last time I pay the price for being the forgotten one." They said little after that. My mother hugged me tighter than usual, but didn't speak. My father offered a stiff pat on the back and muttered something like, "Take care." Mark tried to joke again, something weak about not burning bridges, but I didn't bite. I walked them to the gate, smiled politely, and shut the iron latch behind them like someone closing a chapter without looking back. Later that night, with the villa quiet again and the moon casting long silver lines across the water, I poured myself the final glass of wine and sat by the pool where the reflections shimmered but never lied. My phone buzzed once, an old friend from college, commenting on the same photo I'd printed. The message was simple: "You look free." And I did. I felt it in a way that made no noise, but took up every corner of me. What they don't know and may never know is that I no longer own the villa. Not technically. I transferred it to a trust the week before they arrived, a foundation set up for women like me, women who poured their years into everyone else and found themselves empty at the end of it. Women who woke up at 50 and finally asked the question no one wanted to hear: what if I matter more when I'm not needed at all? I'm already planning my next move, something quieter, something even farther away. I won't announce it. I won't post about it. I'll just go. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them sit in the silence they spent years teaching me to survive in. And maybe, just maybe this time, they'll remember. Not because I asked, but because I left.